To someone that has never heard that word before, what is the blockchain?
There's a few basic explanations that I've heard that I think are good. In terms of the money side of blockchain, I've heard it basically described like it's a giant Excel spreadsheet in a Dropbox folder, and everyone can see the Dropbox folder, but on the Excel spreadsheet you can only like subtract from your own balance and then add to someone else's. That's the only operation you've got, right? Sending money is the idea. So that's sort of it, right? Is it's a big shared database, a big shared ledger. In terms of what it actually does, the reason that like the idea of blockchain has become so influential and has become, you know, grown so fast is because it's the only way on the internet that we know of getting everyone to agree on what has happened in the past, to agree on a common history. So, you know, we've been agreeing on common histories for a long time by taking someone's word for it, right? So, you know, you go to Google, you make a search, they give you a result, you trust it, right? It's not you're not running the search, you don't have all that information, you just trust that Google's giving you the best pages, which is one of the reasons they're successful, is they were good at doing that, are good at doing that. But you've got to take their word for it. All of the systems are like that. You know, PayPal, for example, is how much money do you have in your account? Well, you log in and PayPal tells you, right? There's no way to verify that besides taking their word for it. Blockchain as technology solves that problem by allowing you to verify anything that's happened in that history without, or in the same way that everyone else is, and essentially having the guarantee that everyone is on the same history. There are some caveats there, but that's essentially it. I think it's less than about money, it's about agreeing on past events.
Awesome. I really like that analogy of the Excel spreadsheet on the Google Docs.
That's, I think I heard that like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah,
and it's good. It's exactly,
awesome.
You know, people understand that.
Yeah, definitely. And what's happening in that space in terms of currencies or...
I mean, there's a lot happening in that space. In terms of the currency stuff, I don't think there's been much innovation there. There has been some interesting ideas that have been tried. None amazingly successful. Most of the ideas around that go back to, you know, ideas of stuff like sound money. Particularly, there's often a libertarian sort of bent there, which is not necessarily bad. Sometimes it is, but not necessarily. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. There's a lot of not very interesting stuff going on there. But
what about Bitcoin? Would that be sort of an example of an interesting thing that's happening in that space?
I think Bitcoin was interesting in 2009. Probably stopped being interesting. 2015 is probably that was when Bitcoin died for me. Or actually no, it was more like 2017, but because of events that started then. One of the things blockchain is bad at is, or you know, implementations of blockchains are bad at, is changing the rules. Because if you all agree on the history, you all need a common set of rules to agree on that history. And if someone wants to change those rules to, you know, add a feature or to expand the capacity or things like that, then you've got to get everyone to agree on it for the most part, and that can sometimes cause communities to be a bit toxic. So I don't think Bitcoin's very interesting now. Bitcoin's really basic, right? Is you can send money. There's some really basic smart contract stuff you can do. You can do a lot like off-chain, but you can do that with anything. So who cares? Yeah, I mean it's super basic. It's fairly limited, both in like capacity, the speed of transaction, stuff like that. So it's not, it was innovative back then, but it's not innovative now.
So blockchain gives us the ability to verify, a ledger that is not non-exclusive, basically. And how did that tie into what you were working on?
So, well, particularly one of the things I haven't mentioned about blockchain yet, and this was one of the reasons I got really interested in it at the beginning, was blockchain works without authority. And that's really the thing, is I sort of hinted at it with the PayPal comparison. We can all agree on history via PayPal if we take PayPal's authority as golden, but Bitcoin doesn't have anyone to take authority as golden. And that was the innovation, right? Was, we knew how to send money, we just didn't know how to do it without a bank or without a PayPal. And so Bitcoin really opened that door, and that was what, I guess that was the innovation, was that it was able to get people to agree on history without an authority. Now, if you take the idea of an authority there, then I think it's pretty easy to see that this would be beneficial to voting. And indeed, people have talked about using blockchain for voting. At least, I think either late 2010 or mid 2011 was the first reference I could find. A few months ago, I went and did a search. But that was the earliest I could find. People have thought about it for a long while. The reason that's important is that if there's an organization running a voting system, and that organization is corrupted, then the voting is pointless. It's going to be a foregone conclusion. That's why electoral commissions around the world are usually independent bodies. They're not a government department. They're an independent offshoot. It's funded by the government, but ideally where the government doesn't have an ability to manipulate procedure or staffing or things like that. So if a blockchain gives us the ability to agree on a history, it also provides some of the other important things it does is that it provides a very good censorship resistance sort of paradigm where it's incredibly difficult for any single party to deny service to another party via a blockchain. Okay. And that's obviously good for a voting system because you want to be able to prevent people who aren't citizens or aren't voters from voting, but you don't want to prevent a valid voter from voting, or you don't want a system where that can happen. So blockchain's good in that regard. There's a lot of implementation details and stuff, but it allows us to run an uncorruptible election system. Took a while to get there, but that's the key. Is that it allows us to run uncorruptible elections that are fully publicly verifiable, 100% transparent. That it can't be tampered with, or if it was being tampered with, then it's about as difficult as taking down the internet. So at which point, going to the polling booth on a day where another country is taking down your internet is probably not a good idea anyway. You might want to react to that, but yeah. So it lets us run uncorruptible election systems, which also means that there's a number of benefits there. Yeah. Not just that it saves a bunch of money. But also that it means that small groups can now run an election where obviously if everyone's in the same room it's sort of okay, but if you're spread out over the country, then how do you do that? There's always in previous systems prior to blockchain, the only solutions we had, besides really small groups of people, had a centralized actor, had someone who could manipulate the results. And if you want a good voting system, if you want a good democracy, then that can't happen.
And how are you using this? This amazing ability, that you've identified that blockchain has given us. And so there's a million ways that I imagine it could go, but I guess what direction are you taking it?
Our plans, Flux's plans for blockchain-based democratic systems.
Just quickly before we continue, what is Flux?
Oh, Flux. Flux is the political party that we're here because of. So Nathan and I, we first met in 2014 and then got back together in 2015 to start proper. Came out of this, democracy's broken, we need to fix it, we need to do something. And this is the avenue we've been given. In a democratic society, if you don't agree with a political party that you want to join, then you create your own, or you run as an independent. So this was the avenue. Flux is the vehicle for what we think is a much better democratic system. Okay. All of the problems that we talked about earlier with democracy, I think that we can solve them. Either if Flux were elected today, it would either be immediate or there would be a much easier path forward.
Okay, awesome. So Flux is a political party. Okay.
Yeah, it's a political party. So Nathan and I started it back in I think the first member, which ironically is neither of us. Was April 28th, 2015. Right. But it's a political party to get to take a system of democracy and put it in Parliament via the members that we have, and then allow people not the world over, but people within the electorates that elect Flux members to directly interact with the policy processes going on in those states, territories, federally, wherever.
All right. So I interrupted you because I just wanted to make sure we were sort of across what Flux even was before we started mentioning it. So Flux is implementing a system of democracy And what is that system of democracy?
So that system it's something that we've created. It's called issue-based direct democracy.
Okay.
And the idea is that it's a way to let people engage in a democratic system so that they can focus on the issues they care about and not focus on the other stuff. So if you cared about, say it was at the local level, and you cared a lot about, parking restrictions, but not at all about, actual parks, then you would be able to essentially put all of your political weight into, just talking about the on-street parking or whatever you care about. Whereas in a normal, like the traditional systems of democracy, you can't do that. You have to have an equal say on every issue, which I think that's another thing that democracy does badly, is that having an equal say on every issue is pretty silly from the point of view of an advanced society. If I know a lot about one thing, then why would I have an equal say on something I know a lot about and something I don't know a lot about? Now, it's not like I can just say, oh, I've got this piece of paper that says I know a lot about this, and therefore I should have more of a say on that. That's not good either. So we've got this sort of dichotomy there where if you're given more of a say, by virtue of, like, say, having a degree or something like that, that's bad. But if you have an equal say on everything, that's also bad. And so what we do particularly, and the reason it's issue-based direct democracy and not just direct democracy, is that idea of specialization, is, use your knowledge and your resources and everything like that to influence the stuff that you care about. Now, often the things you care about are either the things you already know a lot about or the things you will learn a lot about in order to, get some results. So there's a big, there's a lot of, I guess, different factors in there, but it lets you specialize, and that's the main thing it does differently. And up till now, I'm not sure if there's really been any other systems of democracy that have focused on that aspect above others. Like, a lot of them are focused on stuff like, trying to be reactive, like liquid democracy, or trying to count votes better. A lot of the counting systems we have, particularly if you're electing more than one candidate. And they're focused on those sort of problems, more technical problems, less human problems. And I think that's why we haven't seen a lot of progress being made over the past 2,000 years or so.
So your votes are weighted based on...
That's a difficult question. Well, not a difficult question to answer, just a long answer. So without going into too much detail, essentially the idea is that people self-organize.
Okay.
So the easy way to imagine this is, I'm not sure if we've got any props we can use, but say actually, here's a good example. Say we're both 10 years old, both been given a packet of Smarties, but I really like red and brown Smarties, and you really hate brown Smarties. Well, it's like, okay, obviously there's a better way to do this, right? You can give me all your brown Smarties. Now, I could just walk away at that point, nice tiny Smartie profit. But that's not great. If we go back to sort of more of a bartering type system, we could imagine, all right, you've got all these brown Smarties that you want to give away. I want more of them. I might, give you my green and my blue ones, things like that. I want the red ones too, so maybe I'll try and tack that onto the deal. But essentially, we've got a way to, reorganize, and we both end up happier at the end, even if we have the same number of Smarties. And that's
in that example, what would the existing democratic way of dealing with that issue be?
So this is sort of where we really start to get into things. So the existing way of dealing with it is actually sort of similar, except that only political parties do it. The government has, their Smarties are just worth more. Right. Like if one vote is one Smartie type thing and the colours are different issues, then their Smarties are worth more. Like, it's they've got a whole bunch of colours they don't care about, but they'll happily vote no on an issue just to frustrate another party, right? Because that increases their ability to leverage them. And if they can leverage them, then, and by leverage I mean essentially manipulating the situation so that party is more likely to support them in something they care about. They're essentially using an issue or a policy as hostage to affect another issue or policy. So that happens now. right? Like politicians, they trade issues all the time. They trade votes. All that sort of stuff goes on. The thing is, it's massively exclusionary. So you can only do it if you're in Parliament, and it's also not a free market, right? In terms of, I mean, you could say it sort of is because it's unregulated, but it's not a free market in the sense that if at the moment the Lib Nats are in power here. So if the Liberals went to Labor, maybe not Labor, if the Liberals went to say One Nation or the Greens or something like that, they can give them a deal that Labor can't accept. Right, the deal isn't made on an open market. And, in the case of the Liberals, they're going to be more likely to make a deal with One Nation than the Greens, I would imagine. So if they are working with the Greens, they might give them a worse deal. Right, so you've got a lot of different, essentially price manipulation type stuff, giving different offers to different parties, things like that. So while, people trade issues, we have the term horse trading to describe that. People trade issues, it's not an open market. Open market maybe more than free market is the better term. It's not an open market. It's highly exclusionary. We can't participate. And so even though you've got some ability to reorganize there, because you have a filter first, that filter being elections, that excludes a lot of people, right? You end up with, in the worst case, like in the States, you end up with, two parties and then you're on the options. And not much trading, but a little bit of trading does still go on, but, not much. By comparison to something like the EU or New Zealand or things like that, where you have a lot of, even more trading and compromise and, things like that go on there. But so trading and specialization is the core behind issue-based direct democracy. That's the reason it can do anything more than what existing systems do.
So trading votes on issues.
It's better to think of it like trading political power.
Okay. And how does that we could use a Smarties example, or could we get an example of that? Yeah.
So I guess the first thing to mention is that going one for one is not a good style, right? So practically speaking, I mentioned this idea of trading political power. The reason is that's what we want to. That's the end goal. Is specialization of political interest, effective legislation, stuff like that. But practically, we end up having votes on issues. So essentially, it is a vote trading sort of system, or a system based on the idea of vote trading to affect specialization. But of course, you can't just have one for one. An issue about the speed of boats in Sydney Harbour is. It might be more valuable to you, but for most people, that's not going to be as valuable as major economic decisions, or whether we should do quantitative easing if we have another financial crisis, or whether we're going to allow federally acknowledged civil unions between same-sex couples, things like that. And so there is the disparity of value relative, for the person. That issues have different values. Not every vote matters as much to the person. So we're already attributing value to votes. We already do that in a way that everyone already agrees is okay. Okay. I mention that because a lot of people raise an eyebrow at the very least when they hear about the idea of vote trading.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If I care greatly about an issue, and everybody cares greatly about a particular issue, how does that affect the value of my single vote?
So if everyone, this goes back to basic economics, essentially. If everyone cares about an issue, then those votes are in high demand.
Okay.
And the supply is, I guess, always the same because, it's one vote per person to start with. But if it's in really high demand, that means that on your typical price supply demand curve, then the price goes up. That's how it satisfies with constant supply but increased demand. So in this sort of example, an issue an issue that matters to a lot of people. So the idea of same-sex marriage is one of those things that matters to a lot of people. Who have couples or who are in a relationship with someone of the same sex. That's obvious. But then it matters to a lot of people who aren't for a variety of reasons, and that will increase the demand. And then for someone like me, I'm I have an opinion about it, but it's not the most important thing to me. There are other things that I would do first, and I'll let everyone else who's already engaged in the other issues sort that out. So from my perspective, when an issue like that comes up that is in high demand, I have the option to essentially have some generalized political capital in exchange for giving that issue to someone else. And so I might, and even in the case that I do care about the outcome, it might be so popular, in such high demand that it's I care that this goes one way or the other, but I also care about other stuff, and if I, traded this vote away, then I could maybe get 100 votes in this other issue. Because much fewer people care about that other issue.
Is that something that you have to consciously go in and, log on or go through some sort of interface to sort of redeem your voting capital? Or is that something that will naturally accumulate if you just don't vote?
No, the default has to be natural accumulation. We have a system where people drop in and out of interest. You might go to another country for a while. What if you go, on a month-long, bushwalk and you're just out of contact, right? Yeah. So the default has to be the accumulation of political capital. Okay. So when you receive a vote, you can either use it, or if you've delegated to someone, then they have an option to use it. But if not, then it goes into a market and you receive political capital back for that, and that's the default. The default is it goes into the market.
Okay. And when it's in the market, let's say you're the one willing to trade your vote away, and it's by default going into this market, and I'm someone that wants to have more say in this issue. Mm-hmm. How do I gain access to your capital that's now in the market?
Okay, yeah. So particularly the vote is what you're gaining capital or gaining access to. I'm getting the capital back, sort of thing. Essentially eBay. Is the thing there's it needs to be a bit more sophisticated than eBay, but an auction system essentially. So and this is just the current idea. We've improved on the market idea a number of times. Originally we were planning a continuous market, a share market type thing. But there's a lot of downsides to that, both in the ability to do price manipulation, except vote manipulation type thing. There's ways to take advantage of it. There's ways to things like sniping in an auction are a problem. So what the current idea as of September 2018 is to run several auctions where you break up the supply, and that way if someone is going to try and snipe one of those auctions to get a better deal or not let on that they're after these votes to keep the price artificially low, if they don't start doing that early, then all the other votes are going to go, so they're not going to be able to get a majority. And if they do it early, then they're giving away, in economics it's called pricing signal. They're giving away information about how many people are interested, what price they're willing to pay for that, that sort of thing. So so that's sort of the idea of running, say 7 auctions, one for each day of the week, over the issue, which would be 15% or so of the votes each day, and that it's just anyone can bid on that to try and accumulate more votes on that. Once that's all done, there's obviously a big pot of political capital at the end of it that's been used by all the people who have bidded and received votes, and that is then distributed proportionally among everyone who put votes in.
So if I understood this correctly, let's just say, for example, we're doing a daily auction. If there's an issue coming up that I am willing to trade my vote for, I go in and I put my vote up for auction, and then when that time of the day comes, people vote, and either it goes through or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, I keep that capital.
You get the capital anyway. Once your vote's in the market, you can't vote with it, right? You can't use it. But rather, so you let someone else, the idea, the sort of explanation level idea here is that you're trading away your say on an issue you don't really care about, giving it to someone who does care about that more, in exchange for future value.
Okay.
So in exchange for the ability to have more of a say on an issue in the future that you care about.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of the idea. The way we do that is we've got sort of like a fake currency to represent the political capital, and you use that, like bidding on eBay with real money for real stuff. You use political capital to bid on votes, and then that political capital then goes back out to the people who put the votes in originally. And so it's there's a lot of elegances. I don't know. This idea has a lot of elegant elements.
Yeah.
Things like so we maintain conservation of votes, as in it starts with 1 vote per person, and we end with the same number of votes. Typically, all the votes will be spent because people who don't care about it goes in the market, and you're not gonna go and bid on votes to abstain. So that's a nice property. It's also non-discriminatory between people in terms of everyone gets a vote. Any political capital you receive is the same as everyone else, or the same that they would receive if they acted the same way you did. And so it's nice in that the system, it doesn't discriminate between anyone. It doesn't have anyone sort of making a determination of who should vote on what. So it allows for self-organization without authority.
Now, are you, how is the party developing the software? The software.
So, there's an interesting story behind it, but to sort of cut to the chase, we started off with this problem of, we're a political party with no money in the bank. How do we build this? I was like, I'll build it. But of course, still had to work and everything else. And it was like, all right, this is going to take a lot of nights and weekends to actually, get to a decent spot. About November of 2015, Nathan and I realized that, well, hold up. One of the reasons that we're building a voting system is because there isn't one available. So why don't we start a company and make that and sell it? And then we can, both fund ourselves, fund the development of this stuff, and hopefully fund Flux too. So that was sort of the original idea. We've gone and done some of that. So Nathan and I started a company called SecureVote. We've built a number of different, or one primarily, but we've got a few systems in development for different voting systems and things at the tech layer. So that's sort of working. The ongoing running costs, minimally the ongoing running costs are fairly close to zero, even for large scale elections. So that's not too much of a worry. But in terms of building out a full proper system, the cost estimates are anywhere between $500,000 and $2 million, just in terms of developers. That doesn't cover marketing or people or PR or anything else. So even from the party's perspective, if we were to do it in house, it wouldn't be super effective.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but issue-based direct democracy is the innovation, and Flux is the layer which implements that innovation.
So I guess there's like the Flux movement, which is the push for IBDD. There's IBDD, the system itself. There's like the Flux party in terms of federal Australian politics, but the vision is that there will be many, many Flux parties the world over.
Sure.
Possibly multiple Flux parties in the same jurisdiction. Particularly if someone's like, I really like IBDD, but I don't like that guy, I think he's doing a crap job in my, place, so I'm going to start another one or whatever else. And that sort of thing, even if whether they call it Flux or not is another matter, but in essence, they could start a party on the same principles pushing IBDD, no worries. So that's roughly the delineation. And then over on the, off to the side, which the main relationship is that, Nathan and I, you've got SecureVote making the tech. That'll be provided to like both Flux and other groups doing similar sorts of things for free, because it's not like groups who are pushing for better democracy have a lot of money in general. So that's roughly the entities involved.
What does the barrier to entry look like now for just your average Australian citizen?
To the entry to
into the Flux party.
Oh, into the Flux party. Joining the party itself is remarkably straightforward. There's no financial contribution needed, no membership fee. You just fill in your details. that's it. You press go and join.
And what does that mean now for me to, click join and to become a member? What does that mean at this point in time?
It means that we can register the parties in the places we haven't registered them in. That's the most immediate benefit. Hopefully, from the party's point of view, it means more volunteers and volunteer resources leading up to elections and things. Hopefully, it also means more votes. In the near future, it will mean being able to participate in the test voting system that we'll be setting up shortly, which will be really cool. It'll mean being able to...
What's that? Sorry, what's the test voting system?
So, just via the parallel journey of Flux and Secure Vote, Secure Vote's developed some early voting tech. It works, it's live, it's out there in production, other people have used it. The main thing left is integrating it in with the existing Flux software, the Flux membership database to authenticate people, things like that. So there's a number of little jigsaw pieces essentially to connect those two systems, or a bit of plumbing. That takes a little while, but once we've got that, then the idea is the experience is you open the app, there's like a little voting section. You'll need to onboard first. Because with any sort of like blockchain or cryptographic system, it's not secure if someone else has your private keys or your secret keys, so they need to be generated on the device. You onboard and then you get a voting system. And it's like you'd imagine, list of issues, past issues, future issues. You can see results for past issues, you vote on current issues, and you can peruse or discuss future issues.
Okay, great.
So that'll almost certainly be live before the end of the year.
Awesome.
Hopefully earlier. So that was, that's that.
Awesome, yeah. All right, I reckon it's probably time to wrap it up. We've talked about heaps of stuff.
Cool. I realise as well, I can't see a clock, so I've got no idea how long we can talk for.
I was just thinking that. Anyway, thanks so much.
Cheers,
I appreciate
man.
it.